Hey, I'm Matt Cimino, and I'm here to help you master Amped. Today, we're going to go over the fundamental concepts to help you be a pro with Amped. We're going to get into how to pick a template and create your first campaign. We're going to go over how to use the editor. It's all about layers, mobile first, all of the key concepts there. We're going to get into targeting rules, so who should see this campaign and when. We're going to go over how you create drafts, launch new split tests, start and end things. And then we'll round that out with integrations, getting it on your site with the Shopify app, or you can install it on any site if you use Google Tag Manager, or just get it into the source, all the integrations, and you'll be good to go. If you will stick with me for just a few minutes here and master a few of these key concepts, you will be a pro with Amped and you will be successful. Let's do this. All right, so make your way over to the templates and we're gonna create our first campaign. You always wanna start from a template. That's gonna be the easiest way to get started. There's so much you can do, so much you can build. Starting from scratch is kind of a pretty steep task. But if you said, okay, great, I really like Ludgate. Pick Ludgate and then decide if you wanna use it for email or SMS. There's gonna be a few more configurations. Once you find the right setup for you, which if this one looks good, great, that matches what I need. Email, phone input, double opt-in, great. Open in the editor to clone. This is gonna bring it up inside of the editor. You can scroll and zoom around in here as if you're in Figma. Now this is a view-only version of this template, so you can kind of get an idea of what's in here. We'll go over how the editor works in a second, but if this template looks good to you, then great, go ahead and use this template. You can create a new campaign or you can bring it in as a split test if you already have a campaign. If it's a brand new and it's your first time using AMP, it's gonna ask you what site you wanna use it on, but the flow will generally be the same. And then once you hit continue, this will create a new campaign from that template. If you see this loading, that's because it's taking a screenshot of that campaign on your site. And then here's the targeting. We're in a draft right now. And once we publish a campaign, it won't be in a draft. True Classic has yet to go live. They're queued up right now. And then when you get in here, you can start editing that design. And when you click on something for the first time, it'll zoom you in. And of course, pinch and zoom, or you've got zoom controls up here, all the normal ways that you would navigate an editor like this. And then we'll get into a few concepts. Okay, so we've already gone over picking the right template, the UI of campaigns, drafts, variations, just to be clear on how that all works. When we're in the account here, if we're looking at our campaigns, they can have multiple variations, and that would be how you split test. So if you want to run this version versus a different one, maybe a different color, a different offer, just duplicate a split test. And then when you publish live, that will go live on the site. Nothing is going to be live on the site right now because we have no active campaigns. All right. And then let's go back to our draft here. Okay, great. Starting to edit the design. Let's get into the editor. And there's some key principles here that I want to make sure you've got in order for you to be successful at this. So let's jump into the editor. When you are seeing this, you're looking at two different viewports, but really it's the same content. These are just mobile and desktop viewports of the same content. So you'll notice when I click and edit, if I change this to 10% off, it's editing on both. And the idea here is that you are really taking a mobile first mentality. So when you're editing content, putting elements into the canvas, whatever you're doing, you want to be editing the mobile size first. And then on desktop, maybe you are making the font a little bit larger, something like that. And let me just break down this concept of how this works with these sort of overrides. So here I have my H1 and it's all about the layers, which we're gonna get to in a second. But I have mobile here and the font size is 50. And then on the desktop one, I have font size of 70. If I clear out that override, this is inheriting it from the smaller viewport. When I come back over here, you'll notice it's just not inherited. And so that means if I go here and I start changing the font size, you'll notice that it's changing on both viewports. That's because it's just getting inherited in the viewports. This is how core HTML, CSS works on the back end. We're just giving you an editor on how to do this. But then if you go to a larger size, then maybe when the viewport is large enough, you want that font size to be a little bit bigger. Great, so maybe you want that to be 70. Perfect. Now, when you go to a larger device type or device size, that will show at 70 pixel font. So it's all mobile first. You want to be editing mobile first and then styling desktop. Just keep reminding yourself, don't come over here and start messing with the desktop one. You want to go mobile first because that's where 80, 90% of your traffic is going to be anyway. Okay, so we're clear on mobile first. Now it's all about the layers. Let's hop back in here and take a look at what I'm talking about. So you've got your layers panel over here on the left side, and that is where all of your elements live. In AMP, there's not a drag and drop functionality, and that's intentional. We might implement a little bit of it, but it's really about where are these layers living and how do they interact with each other. So when you see these are containers, and inside of containers, you have content. So if I click on that top level container, there are containers inside of it. You can kind of see the elements that I'm clicking on inside of that container. So it's all about the hierarchy of what is a parent or child of a container. So this container here, you can see everything's inside of it, and it has a width of 100% and a height of 100%, and it has a fill. That fill is this tan color, and I could change this if my brand is more of like a green. Perfect. Maybe it's blue. Whatever it might be, you've got to dial this in for your brand, but that is changing on both viewports, of course. Mobile first. Remember, we're editing on the mobile size, but that is the overall container. And then inside of that, it has positioning and layout of the elements inside. So inside of this container, how should those elements be laid out? Vertically. There's actually two elements here. So there's this one, which has a height that's not set, and this one that has a height of 35%, so it's taking up that. And this has a flex grow of 1. You don't really need to get into the flex grow stuff like that. That's pretty advanced concepts, and these are going to come set on the template, but if you need to know, it's there. And then inside of this container, it also has a layout. And so the layout of those elements is center, center, and it's going to go in this container. You can see it there. I'm going to zoom it in just for the sake of this video, so we're just looking at this mobile one. But if I say align those elements on the left side, you'll see that all those elements are left aligned. Now here, these look like they're still centered. That's because it's inside of another container. So if I'm selected on this container and I say left align, you'll notice how it goes like that. And then even here, this is another container. So there's that container inside of it. It's centered. I could bring it over. And that's the alignment of those elements inside of these containers. You can also have a container and choose the direction of the content. So you could say, I want it to be horizontal. Now these are going to go side by side like that. If I hit Command Z, I've got all my keyboard shortcuts the same as I would inside of a normal application. But this is all about where do these layers live. And then if I'm going to grab a new element, let's say I want to bring in another line of text, go to add an element, grab your element, drag it in. It's going to give you hints as to where it's going to go. And then you want to make sure that you're placing it into the correct container. You can also copy and paste elements. So if I really like this headline, I want to paste it again, there it is. But I'm always noticing where's that in the layout of my containers. Okay, we've done mobile first. We just talked about containers and layers, which are really what makes the whole thing work. That's your layout. And then let's talk about fonts, colors, and logos. So back into our editor, I'm gonna go ahead and grab onto the logo. And then here on the right panel, I can edit the properties and we can replace this with our logo. SVG is ideal. PNGs are great as well. And then of course, my mobile first styling. I see it's got 110 here, and on this size, it's got 130. I'm always careful what I'm clicking on if I'm certain which element I'm clicking on. Maybe I want to make this a little bit bigger. These sizes are going to come set from the template. And remember, I edited here, but it didn't change here, so there must be an override. There is, I can clear that out. And then maybe I want to go even bigger on the desktop size. So we've got all that set. And then in terms of repeatable styles, we have repeatable styles, and you can tell from this green tint icon, it's also a very clear warning. But if I click on something that doesn't have a style, you won't see it there. You can create styles and change styles. We're going to come back to that. But just to note, we changed the logo, and it changed here because that's the same element. These are different viewports, but in different steps, that changed as well. So we only have to swap out that logo once, and it's going to change in all the steps because we used a repeatable style, which a repeatable style just takes the properties. It doesn't take the content. So for example, here we have H1 and H1. That is a repeatable style. So if I were to change the color, it changes the color on any time I'm using that style, but it doesn't change the content of what's in that element. Okay, we've gone over fonts, colors, logos, repeatable styles we've touched on, and then let's get into steps and repeatable styles. These two are linked as well. So here we saw how when we changed the logo, the repeatable style allowed it to change on multiple steps. Same thing happened with our H1s that were used in these multiple steps. Now, I think we touched on it in the very beginning, but amped works in steps. So you have step 1, which takes you step 2, 3, 4. You can route around to different steps. It doesn't have to go in a numerical order, but in most cases it does. You also have these follow-up steps over here. And this is just a reminder, this is a screenshot of your website in the background. And when I click into this step, you'll notice the elements over here And the only elements that are actually on this page is just this little follow-up step here. Sometimes we call that a second chance, or sometimes we call it a follow-up. But really here it says if this step is closed, which is really this main step. So it says if this step is closed, go to the follow-up on step 1. And if you were to reload the page or go to another page, that is really essentially what would happen is if you closed it. So go to another page, you've got this here, and then this is down in the bottom corner. So there are some rounded corners going on the True Classic site, but for the most part, they are not rounded. So we'll go in here and just clean this up a little bit and use those styles that we already had. Just set this quickly. We know that we were using mono in those buttons. I can search the list. It's looking good. Let's clear out our hover states. And same thing with the text. Let's clear out that hover state. So this is starting to really come together. Now, again, styles repeated. So we're good on that. But you always want to check that all of your steps and all of your follow-up steps are looking good. Over here, just a quick call out. If this step is closed, it's going to end the campaign. But if you go to another page, this is going to remain up. We're going to talk about targeting later. So maybe you don't want that to show on certain pages. We could talk about that in a sec. But going back to our list, so we talked about steps. Let's talk about button actions. I mentioned how the campaign works in steps, but you could also go to different areas, and that's going to happen in the button actions. A lot's going to happen in the button actions, but let's start on the first step and see what we've got. So when I click on the button, I've got button actions. If you click on the text, just be careful. It's all about what elements you click in your layers panel. This is not the button. This is an element inside of the button. So I can click on the button, and then I can see my button actions. This is going to take me to the next main step. And this is an action. So you have other button actions. You can close a step, capture data, which we'll talk about in a second, go to a step, open a different campaign. You can run even some custom JavaScript. You can go to a URL. So if you want that to click to somewhere else, tap to text as an action. And then we're adding more and more all the time. We'll talk about that in a second too. So here it's going to go to the next step. And then on my no thanks button, let's take a look at the action. It's going to close. Great. And remember, when it closes, it's going to follow these rules and you're going to get the follow-up step over here. So if we go to the next step, we're on step 2, email address and continue. Here's my button. Check those button actions, capture data. That's what you're going to want to make sure you have on when you're capturing data. All templates are going to come with this. You don't really need to rewire button actions unless you're doing something custom, but you have the opportunity to do that. And then it's going to go to the next step. So if we go down to the next step, here we are again. While we're here, maybe we'll just change some of this styling, make sure that we've got the correct fonts in use. Go for that thicker weight. Okay, we're looking good. Change these up. You'll notice I'm very specifically clicking on certain things to change them because they are styles. So there's multiple elements in here, but I'm only having to change just a couple. Shout out to creating layouts where you have multiple elements. Remember how we have a container. This container is horizontal and you've got different elements in here. Okay, phone number, you've got a default phone validation country. This will work with any country, but you have to pick what is the default validation. This is just how phone validation works in general. If not, they would be kind of guessing because some Canada and US phone numbers both use +1. You can create campaigns that are specific to certain countries if you really want to set it. But if you were to even show this campaign to somebody who is in the UK, for example, which is +44 for the area code or the country code, sorry. When they type +44, this will actually go ahead and change to the UK phone validation. And of course, this is required. And then over here, button actions takes you to the next one. So that's how button actions work. They should come all set up in your template, but if you need to configure certain things, you can. And again, going back to integrations, when you turn on an integration, if you have capture data on, it's going to send to that integration. You don't have to come in and change each one of your designs. But if you wanted to send it to a different place, you could do that here in the capture data. Come back to integrations in a minute. Previewing. So now, if you feel like you're at a point where, hey, this campaign looks good, we should change some of these colors and fonts. But once you're ready, you can preview it. Now, there's two types of previews. There's preview locally and preview on your site. True Classic doesn't have the code snippet on the site yet, so we just need to preview locally. Preview locally is going to bring up another page, and it's going to take a screenshot of your site. Sometimes this takes a second. It's literally going to your site and taking a screenshot in real time. and then it will layer AMP on top of that screenshot so you can start to get an idea of what this is going to look like, and you can interact with it. I see that it's actually still even loading the site in the background. Sometimes it takes a second. Maybe you want to hit reload, but it will come up eventually. And then here, if you hit preview, you can preview it on your site. And that's a really helpful feature to where you can see exactly what it's going to look like and how it's going to interact with the site. But while you're previewing, it's great to go ahead and run through your integrations. Now, if you're using things that use client-side integrations like Klaviyo, so with Klaviyo, it's going to send not only through the backend, but it's also going to send in through the front end. So if you're previewing locally, just know that those test conversions aren't going to show up perfectly because you've got things going on that have to be on-site tracking. This is not actually on your site. This is on a staged preview versus once you install that snippet, hit preview on your site, it's going to put this in the URL, and then that's what's going to tell your site to show the AMP campaign. And that'll happen once you get the code snippet on. All right, back to our agenda here. We've knocked out some of the key principles of using the editor. And now let's talk about how do you do your targeting. Your campaign targeting comes down to a few main things: start conditions, triggers, pages, and then some advanced stuff. And then we'll just touch on segments and how those work in relation to campaign targeting. So let's go back to our design here. I'll go back. That takes me out to the campaign level. Targeting is set on the campaign level, and you've got your design here. That's what we were just working on. Of course, we can split test it, change the name of it, and also change the name of this particular campaign. So on the campaign level, we have things like start if they're in a segment. AMP comes with 4 pre-built segments, which you can configure, and we're going to go with the anonymous visitors. That's the most common one. And then we can add in other start conditions. You can do any kind of start condition that you want. Maybe the traffic source is broadly Facebook or Instagram. You could do things like the number of sessions needs to be greater than, or number of page views, geolocation. You could say, hey, this is a US only one. Or you could do segments, which we'll talk about in a second. You could do if they viewed a specific campaign. So if they viewed another one 0 times in their session or at least once, if we've gotten a certain type of data off of them, maybe their email address or something custom even, we could check device type. Really, you're probably going to change how this shows based on device type and triggers, but you've got both. You could check cookies. You can even do custom code, so you can evaluate any kind of JavaScript language you want. You do not need this. All of these rules below in the UI are going to be fine, but for some of our really large clients, they need some really advanced JavaScript logic, and then you just always need to return true or false. So you can run anything. This can interact with the DOM, check things on the page, all that jazz. All right, so we've got triggers, all the ones you're probably already familiar with: time on page, total time on site, inactivity, quick scroll and flick up, and exit intent. Just to touch on what these are, time on page means that particular page. Total time on site, so if you said, hey, I want them to have been on my site for at least 60 seconds in that session, that would be an aggregate of, hey, I landed on the home page, stayed there for 10 seconds, went to another page for another 50 seconds, and then as soon as I load up the next page, if the timing was perfect like that, it would show then. Then inactivity, this is a phone and tablet only trigger, and this basically says that if you're scrolling around and then you stop scrolling, it'll do sort of an inactivity and show. Quick scroll flick up, that's maybe good for like a blog. If you're scrolling down the page and do that quick flick and scroll up to get the back button back, then we can target that. And then exit intent, this is a desktop only trigger, and that's when you have your mouse and you take your mouse and you break that plane, you go up and off the page. That's exit intent. Okay, so those are your triggers. Pages targeting, this is very straightforward. It's 2 types though, and be conscious of that. It's currently viewing and has visited. So currently viewing page URL that contains, let's say you said, I want this to only run on a collection page. So great, maybe you want to run it like that. That's going to run anytime that they're currently on a collection page. But if you said, hey, I want to make sure this is for someone who has not visited a page URL that contains UTM campaign equals already has discount or something like that. Maybe there's a reason you don't want to show somebody this campaign because they came in off a specific ad. You would want to use has not visited page. And they're just the 2. So currently viewing or currently not viewing, has visited and has not visited. Page URL and page path. URL means it's going to check the entire thing in the URL. Page path, reminder, starts with only the slash. You can use currently viewing page URL that contains collection, But if you had collection more, that page is still getting targeted in this because it's just checking the entire URL. But if you said currently viewing page path that matches exactly collections, that's only going to run on that collection page, or slash. That would be the home page. Just one of the more common ones. If you only want it to run the home page, it's currently viewing page URL path that matches exactly slash. That's what comes after the domain extension. And it excludes anything like parameters like UTMs or anything like that. Okay, we can get into that. We got more of that in the Help Center. The rest of these are kind of helpful defaults. They're more advanced, but I'll touch on them quickly. Pause it if certain conditions are to match. So you could say, hey, that's where maybe you have that second chance element in the bottom corner, but you don't want it to show if they're maybe in the cart. You could say, hey, pause it if current URL contains cart, something like that. But I think it's a fine place to show in the cart. Stop it if they've placed an order. So once this campaign starts, you would need to then stop it. Now, just going back in, we have our first step, which then gets closed. And then you get this. And over here, it says it's going to stop if they close it. So there's an X button here. They can get rid of it easily. But if they reload the page, they're going to remain here. So that campaign is actually still on until it's paused. So that's paused or stopped. And stopped would say, hey, it's gone. To restart again, it would have to match for all these rules. And also frequency. So session handling is a bit advanced. You can kind of leave it here. Not going to touch on that right now. And then frequency, start it once a session, start once every 7 days, start once per page view, start once ever. And then safe display is a great feature that we have where, let's say you have an entrance, an exit, a blog. This just makes sure that they're not seeing multiple campaigns at once or also too soon. So don't start this campaign if the visitor's seen another campaign in the last 30 seconds. But they can also overtake and replace. That means if you have a second chance open on one, but they haven't had a full campaign open, another one can open later. This is a fine default. Most people just leave it right here at 30. And we're probably going to just put these under like an advanced section because most of the action is start, triggers, and pages targeted. Okay, let's talk about segments real quick. So we talked about start it if they're in the segment of anonymous visitors. Segments are set at the account level, and this is just to save you time. Anonymous visitors is the most helpful one. So, but it's a compound segment, as they're not in the segment of already known visitors, which is defined here. Now, these segments come pre-defined in your account. There's 4 that come in your account already set up, and it says if they visited /orders/account, UTM medium equals email or source equals email. If they visited that URL that contains one of these strings in their lifetime, they're an already known visitor. And in the anonymous visitors, we're going to say they're not in the segment of already known visitors, and we don't have their email address. So we're doing the best we can to try to understand if we know who they are. Depending upon your integrations, you may even have the option. So if you've got the Klaviyo integration enabled, you can pop in here and you can say Klaviyo identity is unknown. And that will also check the Klaviyo snippet that's on their site, assuming they have the Klaviyo on-site SDK. That will coordinate with them and check. It's not going to block if they don't have that Klaviyo SDK on, but most folks do, or else you wouldn't get the Klaviyo behavioral tracking. So that is how you can hop in here, set your campaign targeting. They've already got some great campaigns already set up, but this was just an example here that we've been working on. Going back out to the campaign level, here's all of our targeting rules and how it's interacting with the segment. Okay, we've gone over the campaign and the variations, but let's talk about how it all works. How's the plumbing work to actually launch these things, split test them, and where do we go from here? So when we're in the campaign, this is just a draft, and we can tell it's never been published. I'm going to pull up a couple of examples, but let's say we're ready, we've got our campaigns here, and we're ready to publish live. We'd hit publish live. It's going to run through some checks, make sure there's nothing that would be an issue, and then you can publish it live. Now, they work in sort of a publishing mechanism. So you can edit all you want, and it's not going to go live on your site until you hit publish. And these would run in a split test. But then if I want to take one out, it sort of makes a new draft. I can change that variation. And then one of the most frequent questions that we'll get is, how do I get Amped onto my site? The easiest way is going to be through the Shopify app, but you can use Amped on any site. So if you install it through the Shopify app, just install the app and then make sure to turn on the theme embed. But if you're using another platform, you can use Google Tag Manager, or you can really just install it manually. There's one line of code that you've got to get onto your site. It's just this script tag. And then we've got a help article. So if you put in how to add, it should come right up, how to add AMP to your website. The easiest method being that Shopify app. You could use Google Tag Manager, or we've got a few other platforms that we go through. But really with Google Tag Manager, you would just grab that code snippet and include it on all pages, and you're all set. Okay, we're going to touch on this briefly. We're inside the Feastables account. We've got our performance overview right up top, and then we can go into the campaign and we can see campaign performance for that particular campaign. And then we can do obviously date range. We can schedule things on and off. We can turn the campaign off if we need to. And then we can see what we're currently running in a split test. We can also, of course, see our targeting below. But here's where you can see your results. You can hop into the campaign, see how it looks and how it works. And then if we go back out to the campaign level, here we are with our stats again. If we wanted to finish a split test, so if we said, okay, great, this one's working better, we could remove this variation and discard it. Now we've got a new draft. If we go back out to the campaign level again, we have a draft in progress. And then in that draft, we only have one variation. If we wanted to create another split test, we could say duplicate a split test. And so we have our orange and pink variation. Let's say we wanted to change like a headline test. Here's where Mr. Beast wants you to join the crew. We could change it to something else. Mr. Beast has selected you to join the crew. Great. We could hop in, make that change. And then when you're ready, you could publish it live. But again, you're in the campaign, you have a draft in progress, and you still have what's currently active. And then when you're ready, you can publish it live. Okay, talking about integrations. Let's say we were offering something different. So if this were maybe a discount, hey, you've got 5% off versus 10% off, and we wanted to adjust where it's sending for integrations, we can go to the step that captures data. So here we've got email. And if we go to our button actions, we're sending to the default Klaviyo settings that we have in the account. If we change this and hit customize, we could send it to a different list or adjust profile properties. And now Feastables is using our integration with PostScript that leverages on-site opt-in, and that works slightly different. That's in the button actions. Here at subscribe to on-site opt-in, we can assign it to a keyword if they're a new subscriber, and if they're an already existing subscriber, we can still assign them to a keyword or take them to a different step. And then just a reminder here of how this works. On-site opt-in, essentially, they're going to put in their phone number, they're going to get a verification code, and then they're in. They can also resend the code, things like that. And that's AMP 101. If you've got those concepts down, you're ready to roll. We're going to have 201, 301. We're going to get into advanced split testing things, how you want to create really custom layouts. But really, my recommendation to you is grab a template, customize it to your brand, make sure you've got your integrations connected, test it, preview it, and let it rip. But also reach out to us. We want to help you. We want to see you be successful. Shoot us a note. We're happy to look it over before you publish. And if you need a hand, we'll dive in with you. Thank you for watching. Excited to see what you create. Crush it.